Of the Palestinian people will soon be in the hands of former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee, who was Trump's choice for U.S. ambassador to Israel, and a man who does not believe Palestinians even exist. The selection of Huckabee, a right-wing Christian evangelical who is an unapologetic Christian Zionist, is an open acknowledgement that a two-state solution, that's dead. Here's what Huckabee thinks about regional issues.
Basically, I mean, there really is no such thing as, and I have to be careful in saying this because people would really go, there's really no such thing as a Palestinian.
I think it's time for us to quit playing this pretentious game that there's going to be a two-state solution where both sides share the same country and real estate and streets, because they're not.
There is no such thing as a West Bank. It's Judea and Samaria. There's no such thing as a settlement. They're communities.
That's pretty clear. The news of Huckabee's selection was celebrated by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's most extremist coalition members because he is also a huge proponent of settlements in the West Bank. Huckabee will be joined by Steve Witkoff, who will step into the role of envoy to the Middle East. Witkoff has no prior experience in Middle East politics, but he too is a big backer of settlements, and he likes to golf with Trump, which is all the expertise you really need in this upcoming administration. Joining me now is Mehdi Hassan, editor-in-chief and CEO of Zeteo. Mehdi, you, before the election, made a very clear-eyed assessment that folks who really don't like the Biden policies on Israel and Palestine are going to really hate it if Trump takes over. You turned out to be absolutely right. Let's talk about this new team. Your thoughts on them, Huckabee et al.
Oh, sadly, Joy, it's happened very quickly. The Trump appointments, one is worse than the next. I was writing a Guardian column this week about the Trump cabinet and the hawks in the cabinet. I had to keep updating it before I could file the piece, because every few minutes it was one more. It was Huckabee, then it was Hegseth. One hawk after another. Donald Trump is not a dove. Donald Trump is not a peacemaker. Anyone who believed that was, lying to themselves or deluded. Trump's first term showed us that he was a hawk on Israel and a hawk in general. The people he's appointed are just really out there. I mean, Peter Hegseth, who called for a preemptive strike on North Korea, is going to be in charge of the Defense Department and nuclear weapons. And on Israel-Palestine, where in a place like Dearborn, we saw a lot of Arabs understandably frustrated and enraged by what Biden and Harris did to Gaza, armed Netanyahu. Some of them, and I interviewed one of the imams from Michigan, fell into the trap of thinking Donald Trump would be not as bad or equally as bad or better. And we're seeing with Huckabee, I mean, Huckabee, Joy, and your intro is so important there. He's not just to call him an extremist is an insult to other extremists, right? He's so extreme, he makes Benjamin Netanyahu look moderate on Palestine. He makes George W. Bush look moderate on issues of war and peace. In 2008, Joy, Mike Huckabee criticized George Bush for setting a timetable for withdrawal from Iraq. He wanted to stay in Iraq for longer. He's a big Iraq war guy. And on Palestine, as you say, he calls himself an unreformed, unapologetic Zionist. He believes God gave the land only to the Jews. He's a religious fanatic. He refuses to admit that there's a Palestinian people. He says there's no occupation, no settlements, no West Bank, only Judea and Samaria. He wants one state, a Jewish state, no Palestinian state. It's a disaster in many ways. Obviously, the Palestinians are already living through a disaster in Gaza. And then the West Bank, it's only going to get worse.
You know, the idea of the way that power works is that you have to set yourself up in a position where you can negotiate. With the pro-Palestinian movement, and as you said, it's a righteous cause in the sense that these people are really suffering in Gaza. What they're now going to get is an administration that you can't even protest, because you now have Pete Hegseth in charge of the military, and Trump saying he thinks you should deport or shoot protesters. So now there's really no avenue for protest at all. And this is the piece you're talking about. This is the Guardian piece. You made a really good point that people voted for Trump in part, some of them, saying he was the peace candidate. He dropped more drones in 2 years than Obama dropped in 8.
Yeah. We've memory hold the first Trump presidency, the drone strikes, the killing of Qasem Soleimani, the bombing of Syria, the bombing of Iraq, the bombing of Somalia, the bombing of Afghanistan with the Moab, the mother of all bombs. This guy was not a peace candidate. In fact, he pardoned literal war criminals. And guess who told him to pardon those war criminals? Pete Hegseth, his new defense secretary. The guy running the Pentagon is the guy who thinks, war criminals, fine. So it's a very worrying state of affairs. I think if you're worried about war with Iran, you look at all the Iran hawks who are in the administration, Marco Rubio, its Secretary of State, very hawkish. Neocons, as I say in the Guardian piece, Trump has the same playbook. He attacks neocons on the campaign trail, wins, and then hires neocons. John Bolton in term one, Mike Pompeo, Nikki Haley, this time round Marco Rubio, Pete Hegseth, Elise Stefanik, Mike Huckabee, who's even worse than neocon. He's a Christian evangelical Zionist who thinks end of times is going to come about quicker if we have some major war on Israel's behalf in the Middle East.